Hey, Carl.
Hey,
Go ahead and turn on all the new fancy stuff.
yeah, I'm reading all of these new things.
Let's see. All right, turn on the AI companion, but that I think is different from the transcripts. Hey, Ben.
Hello.
Oh, we can live broadcast to YouTube. Not that anyone would watch my channel. Hey, Marc-Antoine.
Sorry for being late.
No later than most people.
Okay. Hi Ben. Hi Carl. Hi Bentley. Who else is there? Fifth Joe.
Hello.
Hey.
I have new thoughts I want to share, but I think maybe we should do a round of who else has news.
Yeah, that's a good idea. So for me, not much progress on my project. Well, some project process. I do hope to have a video out, a kind of a prototype video of what the videos that I'm going to make are about. And then one other thing that I'd like to kind of talk about is us getting a bank of debates, debate trees, maybe not in an ideal format like Marc-Antoine's building, but that I think it'd be good to have. I need to make them for myself, so it might as well be something that we can all use. Anyways, that's me for now.
I know you had a thread that I couldn't address at the time because I was really busy, but about definitions, the role of definitions. So maybe that's something we should get back into. But yes. Okay.
Anybody else want to jump in and give a 1 minute summary of what's going on? If you want.
I can go. I don't know. I've just been making consistent progress, I guess, on small refinements on my tool. Added like indicators to nodes, so now you can see if they have like questions, facts, or sources that are relevant. And then I'm designing, letting users like save custom views for their diagrams. But yeah, nothing crazy, I guess. Popcorn to Ben.
I guess I finished my first intro project with Society Library. If you go to perspectives.societylibrary.org, there's a little tool you can explore there. It can generate a bunch of perspectives on a debatable question and see a bunch of arguments from a number of different lenses supporting each of those perspectives. And so that's all AI generated, no RAG or anything like that. But I'm getting more familiar with how Society's library is working and excited to be helping them more into the coming months.
For context, this group has seen ClaimGen before it was open source, but basically now there's a public version that y'all can use. So that's a news item in itself. Carl, and then I'll go.
Sure. I don't have much to report. I was messing around with automatically fact-checking a web page, and I was very early in the stages, so don't really have a lot to report there, other than I ran up against probably something that comes early in everyone's exploration of tokens per minute limits and rate limiting, and I didn't get very far around getting around that. I also just kind of was busy with other things too.
Okay. First, just context. I'm working, like I've done a bit of tool chain unification for Society Library for this past while. Flame Miner is able to coordinate a lot of other components at this point, not all of them yet. We're getting there. But in the past few weeks, I've been working more on helping Society Library. What would to try to map out what would a frame-based debate map look like, as opposed to just links, like frames, as in more complex relationship between arguments. For example, if we have a trade-off discussion, well, trade-off is between, an evaluation of this and evaluation of that. So there's more complex relationships than can be expressed by just a link. And something that's really obvious to me is that often when you're dealing with a trade-off or with a frame will contain implicit subframes. And I think that's very natural. Like there's simple relationships that are part of a more complex relationship. I've spoken a lot about cognitive patterns for a while here. And what I'm saying is cognitive patterns are kind of fractal in that the cognitive pattern is made of simpler cognitive patterns and vice versa. And I'm trying to make a data model for this, and from this. And while 2 weeks ago, I was at a conference. It was a data AI conference. And there was somebody discussing something called combinatorial complexes. So basically, let me get the name of the researcher. Is that the one? I'll try to find the articles and post them. They may not come immediately, but you'll have it. So Mustafa Hajij is the name of the researcher. And basically what he's done, and I think this is interesting in itself, is he's generalized the notion of hypergraphs and topological meshes. I don't know if you're familiar with topological meshes, but basically you build points into lines and lines into triangles and triangles into surfaces, and you can build up the dimensions that way, which is pretty obvious, and a lot of our visual construction is based on that. But the mathematical properties are really interesting. It's that you're always defining a cell from simpler cells. And on the other hand, you have hypergraphs, which have these n-ary, not recursive hypergraphs, but hypergraphs, who have these n-ary connections, but there's no notion of hierarchy and ranking. And since my frames, I find my frames are containing simpler frames. Oh, no, that'll come later. His idea is to combine these ideas. So he basically has the notion that each n-ary relationship has a rank, and any cell can include cells of a lower rank. And that generalizes both hypergraphs and complexes. And he's made an extension of the graph neural network machinery to handle these combinatorial complexes, which I think is extremely interesting. And so he does deep learning mostly in topological structures at this point, but he is very much looking at, and how does it generalize to knowledge hypergraphs. And so I got to think, okay, how does this apply to knowledge hypergraphs? And one thing that bothered me is the way his definition works, and that's I'll get into CDL territory soon. Because he's working with topology, when you define a line by 2 points, there's only one line between those 2 points. In a property graph database, obviously you can have 2 links between the same 2 nodes. You can have 2 edges between the same 2 nodes. So it seems he's missing something there about, and I thought, oh no, that's not what I need after all, because there's this constraint that there's a unique relationship between any 2 entities. I'd have to add, node type and attributes and this and that. And then I realized, actually, wait a second. We're still looking for canonicality. This is where it gets interesting. On the one hand, obviously there's many links between any two nodes. On the other hand, if we start adding elements of definition to the link to make it unique, to give it a unique signature by adding actors to the frame, so to speak, and make it into a something higher level, we are defining a mathematical signature. And there's no guarantee that any two statements will have the same signature as long as we're doing progressive formalization and the statements are underdefined. But as we define them more precisely, we should asymptotically get towards uniqueness and a real canonical signature. So basically, the non-canonicality of a signature is a sign that we're not done defining. And this, for me, was a real interesting intuition in terms of how do we combine progressive formalization with the need for canonicality, and saying canonicality is the endpoint of the formalization process, not the initial point. Joe.
Were you saying that like because you were just saying that like between two nodes, you know, there should be many different kinds of properties that could be between those two nodes. You're saying that like you could apply many properties to one edge to make it like still fit the only one edge between two nodes type thing, and then it like evolves into this unique kind of edge based on all of those like relations or
I need to dig deeper into his code. I'm just beginning my I'm getting a lot out of the shallow reading right now.
Right.
I think from what I understand is he has the equivalent property graph. Each edge can have properties, but the uniqueness is defined by the points. But in a way, when you're adding properties, some of those properties correspond to entities, right? So in a way, you're bumping the arity of your edge. You're making it a fuller description of your edge. You're adding slots in the frame or roles in the topic from the topic mapping perspective. And so you are bumping its arity up to the point where it becomes, well, it is a unique combination of all the actors that help to define this particular relationship.
Right.
Will that necessarily lead to uniqueness? Maybe not. I think that plus type, but type can be seen as an actor up to a point, right? It's a bit weird to do that. It's really a twist of the formalism. But I'm trying to, the basic intuition I have is we want canonicality, we want uniqueness. Of course, we know about progressive formalization, but I'm thinking we could be formal about this and say things are formal enough when they become unique. And at some point, they'll stop being unique because some other link, ambiguity happens and some other link will have the same signature. And then, okay, then that means we need to distinguish more. But being able to say this link, yeah.
I'll just say, I at least personally have lost you because I don't know what each of these words correspond to in the debate map.
Sorry.
And if I'm the only one, then continue. But I just wanted to mention that in case other people are lost as well.
There's a lot of old shared context here, but you're absolutely welcome to ask. Okay, think of debate map. You have nodes and edges, right? The edges represent certain like argument links and stuff like that, right? But
like
when you're
supports or
dealing,
critiques.
yeah, and I'm saying there's some relationships that are higher arity. If somebody is saying
meaning the like hypergraph, it's like edges on edges.
Edges on edges, that's a
Like
recursive,
multiple edges on the
recursive,
same two nodes. Is that what you're...
an edge connecting multiple nodes.
Oh,
I mean,
I see.
my kind of like a link is basically a binary edge. It links two nodes.
Right.
So it's
you might have like
three
two
nodes.
Sorry.
So
you might have two nodes that like together support some like a proposition, but like separately they don't like they're an and or something. So that'd be 2 to 1.
Let's give a pure argumentation example because I think it's appropriate. It's saying I think proposition 1 is good because it doesn't cost much. I think proposition 2 is good because it's safer. well, then the whole, it's the whole Tim's argument about, pandemic, human cost versus economic cost, right? You're comparing two evaluations. You're saying this proposal can cost so much, this proposal can have so much human cost, and through some equivalence factor, I'm thinking that this argument is more important than that argument or outweighs that argument. So, or this is a trade-off between these two arguments. So here, when you do a trade-off, you're really comparing two positions, two evaluations, and an evaluation factor and saying, is it worth it or not? So there's many actors involved. Now, you could kind of do it with a lot of binary links, and that's what RDF does. But what's happening at a deep level is that there's more elements in the description of what's happening than is just given than if you just express it as links. I mean, of course you can express it as links, but it becomes clearly decomposed. Like it's a unit that has to encompasses all those links to make sense.
So a
And that's
frame
why
then, because like you showed me like the frame stuff that we were talking about before.
Yep.
That is a higher arity edge because it connects multiple nodes with a single edge.
Yes.
And this is a better way than trying to create edges on edges and only have binary edges because it allows things to become a little bit flatter and simpler in that sense.
I think they're higher level mental objects, and as such are a bit easier to deal with. It's about chunking. I mean, I don't know if you remember Hofstadter speaking about chunking. We, as humans, we see patterns and then we start giving a name to the pattern. And what is wonderful about that is once we've given a name to the pattern, we're able to refer to the pattern with one word, and it becomes, the 7 plus or minus 2 units we can hold in short-term memory. Well, they become higher level things if you use these higher level chunks. So the more higher level constructs you use, the more you can hold in your head in a way, because each of those 7 things can be fairly complex, as long as you don't have to think about its components too much, but you can think about it up to a point, and that's enough to hold more complex things in your short-term memory. So the idea that a more complex frame is more useful than a link or a frame decomposed as a bunch of links. It's easier to reason about the frame as a whole than to say, oh, this frame is really this link plus this link plus this link plus this link.
Okay. I think that makes sense. And I wasn't visualizing frames like that before, but that's definitely interesting because I haven't thought of, or I didn't even consider that edges could have more than 2 nodes in the past, but like that makes sense.
That's what we call a hypergraph, yeah. And when you can have an edge to an edge, that's a recursive hypergraph. Now, again, the combinatorial complexes are not explicitly generalizing recursive hypergraphs. They just say hypergraphs. And I'm still trying to, but here I'm afraid I need to be sure I read the article right, and I need to reread the article to get 100% sure of that. But whether I'm exactly using the combinatorial complex formalism is not 100% important, though it would be useful to be able to reuse, like he's got this great open source library for doing graph neural network out of these, so that would be nice. But what's important to me is this notion, what's the relationship between formalization and canonicality in the context of progressive formalization and of imperfect formalization? That's what I wanted to really bring to today. Oh, hi, Jack. Jack, I just went through the notion of the use of combinatorial complexes for progressive formalization, which we went through yesterday.
Indeed.
Can you share the name of the paper?
Yeah, I'll give you papers and references. Give me a second
Thanks.
while you discuss it, I guess.
I think all I had to say about what I understood about what you said is that it makes sense intuitively that I don't know if I can reuse the same terminology correctly, but basically as you've reached the proper arity, like the arity is settled, or whatever the right terminology would be, like you've reached the most specific thing, then you call that canonical. But then some groups, how to say this, like some groups would look at that and be like, well, I guess that's canonical, although they're seeing a lot of stuff that seems unnecessary to say. And other groups would be like, oh, yeah, it's good that you specified all that because I didn't think you needed to. I wouldn't have known what you were talking about if you hadn't specified you were talking about that type of this or this specific situation. So there, for usability, there may be like a layer on top that kind of either returns to like where people started before they formalize down, or connects these higher level, like these lower arity levels with higher arity. I don't know if arity is the right.
No, it's absolutely right. He calls it rank, but it's absolutely relevant. Okay, as I said, what I'm proposing is to use uniqueness as an indicator that things are canonical enough for now. I don't think canonical is ever going to be a definitive property. But on the other hand, when something is canonical for now and stops being canonical, then we have a signal, hey, this was an ambiguity. Let's solve it by adding details. Let's try to preserve canonicality whenever we actually obtain it. But what I'm saying is the uniqueness of the signature, and a signature defined in a very simple way is what entity does this refer to? Can be, and ideally, because I think recursively, subframes does it refer to? What subframes and entities in subframes does it refer to? That simple signature can be, if that is not unique, we need to say something more. and making that a measure of how far are we on the path of progressive formalization.
So when you say there's something that's unique, and that being unique is enough to say that we're good enough on this area before we work on another area of the debate graph, what is the thing that's unique? Is it like a frame on holes, a specific sentence, or like what?
It's the signature of the frame as
which is
the list of its terminal nodes, and probably the subframes it also includes. So whatever it contains, right? A frame contains references to other stuff. So it's basically the set of its subnodes, really, some of which are also frames or not. I mean, if trivially a node is a zero array frame, it's all frames all the way down. But the notion that there's rank, right? So a frame has to have lower ranked frames up to the moment where you arrive at, that's well grounded. You at some point you arrive at zero array frames, which are nodes. This signature, the set of frames, should define uniquely the frame's meaning. Ideally, it won't necessarily, because maybe the frame is incomplete, but that's precisely it. When you know that when it's unique, you know it's probably close to complete enough for now, which is useful.
So, like, I can imagine a very not fleshed out debate that has just a couple of frames, like a single syllogism. If Socrates is a man, all men are mortal, therefore Socrates is mortal, like make that into a debate math, whatever. And so like that would be unique within that graph.
Micro universe.
But as you keep on adding to it, like if you start to get like the same signature, so you have the same argument, but maybe there's different definitions, if Socrates actually means cat or something, then you have to like expand upon it and go like another level of depth to find what Socrates means. And then once we get uniqueness, then it's canonical. And so you keep on adding stuff until
in this universe
overlap. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, it's kind of what I'm absolutely.
Okay.
It's very simple in a way. I'm going through this roundabout thing through the mathematical modeling, and then because it's how I got there, but also because I think this mathematical modeling is absolutely relevant and interesting and important. But yeah. I'll also give you the GitHub.
So I guess when you were talking about the n area and edges between nodes, I wasn't particularly thinking of everything as like properties of like a node that would eventually make it canonical. I was thinking, like like when you're thinking of it in entity and then like something else or like a claim and then something else like supports that claim, that doesn't like I don't really think of that in terms of like, oh, is this thing canonical or not? I think more of relations that are specifically like property relations of a node, like, oh, it's red, it's from Texas, its name is this.
The argumentation frame is one type of frames and the one we focus on in this community. But for me, it becomes interesting to analyze the content of the arguments. And when we start saying, this is a good idea because it will have such and such hoped for consequence, and then you want to compare it with, oh no, but we should do this because it has this, well, the same consequence. Well, we'd like to know the same consequence and that there's two ways to arrive at it. And then we can compare other properties of the different means. But so that means analyzing the content of the argument and to say this consequence is unique. And then, yeah, absolutely. Being able to say, is this consequence the same as that other consequence? Is that consequence canonical? Well, it depends on its properties and what's expected and everything you said about features. Now, what are the features that distinguish this consequence from a different consequence?
So like cost, like human cost versus financial cost, are those things that we're like considering as like canonical or not? Or are these just descriptors of something like it benefits?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and it's not an obvious one. I think not all properties are relevant to canonicality, and that's I've mentioned a few times. What are the distinguishing properties versus incidental properties? This is an old Aristotelian distinction, between essential and secondary properties. I think Aristotle had it wrong because he was trying to prune the essential to an absolute minimum, and to one only, which isn't always true. There can be more than one distinguishing property. Man is the animal that laughs. That's what this sentence is from. It's like, what is the unique property of humans? Now we know mice laugh. Took a while. So it's not a unique property. But the notion that there are properties that are essential to distinguishing the uniqueness of the. So for example, in case of consequence, like who will it impact positively and negatively? What is the causal frame? Like, this thing will cause this thing, will cause this thing. What is the at each step of the causal frame? What are the inputs and outputs? I mean, those would all be part of the signature of this will happen.
Right. I guess I'm slightly confused because like when I think of causes and effects, like I feel like each cause is something that's like a question of, is this thing an independent entity or like a independent unique thing to consider? But when you have like a string of causes, like if this causes another thing, is that helping to define something that's canonical, or is that just saying that that's
No. I was thinking of intrans, not extrans. Yes. If something is caused by ABC and then something else is caused by something, the same thing is caused by something different, is it really the same thing if it has a different set of causes? Now, the effects are another story.
Right.
Like effects would not be essential.
Oh, I see. I see. Yeah, I think I'm less confused. Thanks.
But you're right. And by the way, I want to put this in a slightly broader context. I believe strongly in the value of frames. That's another conversation I had with Jack yesterday. I'm trying to make that more formal, and I need to write this down. The reality is, classical AI didn't succeed the way that neural AI did recently. It was a huge effort to create these frame representation and these upper ontologies and these abstract representations of stuff. And it turned out to be too complex to be usable. And people didn't use them that much. Now, I mean, some people did, academics did, but I don't think it impacted the real world of debates. And I think that's unfortunate, but we also have to realize the approach. How is what I'm doing different, and will it run into the same issues? And my intuition here, it's purely intuitive. One reason these things fail is that they were very principles first, very formal, like let's have this ideal model of how things are and compose everything out of these atoms. And there's this old conversation between taxonomy versus folksonomy, right? Taxonomy where everything is put into these mutually exclusive categories. And again, first principles, very abstract academic work, versus folksonomy. It's like people put tags on things, and a lot of people put that tag on a thing, so that tag is useful to describe that thing. But that doesn't give you structure, and it doesn't necessarily give you intuition. You don't know why this thing was considered that way. It might be prejudice, it might be whatever, right? And it's always been obvious to me that we need something kind of in between, because conceptual categories change all the time. We need to be able, like in a pure folksonomy taxonomy situation, if you have, it should be very easy to propose new categories. And when people have, converged on a tentative category and have an explicit notion of here's a tentative category, and when people use it a lot, then okay, then maybe it needs incorporating and thinking about it, and then let's be formal about it. And let's not be formal about everything everybody proposes, but the popular categories that are proposed because they're missing in the taxonomy, like have people use a mix, like use a taxonomy when you can and propose something when you cannot. And then if people propose something strongly, then okay, we need to incorporate it. So it's about evolving taxonomy. And I think it's going to be the same with the frames. There's some basic frames, and I'm trying to keep that to a minimum, to be honest, about, somebody's thinking something, somebody's saying something, somebody's contradicting something, or two concepts are mutually exclusive. Basic stuff. What is the basic stuff? I don't know. That's what I'm trying to figure out. But I certainly hope that after that, we'll be able to say, here's a new frame. I think it encompasses some of those basic frames, but it may not be limit itself to it. Maybe we need a new basic frame. But it should be easy to propose frames, and then be very evolutionary in how we build things from the bottom up and not always from the stated atoms. And this is what I hope will save us from the failure of the very pure knowledge, formal knowledge modeling approach, formal ontological approach, a kind of between ontology and folks ontology, I don't know, between formal and folk ontology, like finding this sweet spot between just enough formalism for the basics, but then after that you can grow it. And that means having a flexible frame system.
And I 100% agree with that, because like anything we design now will be wrong in the future. It's just like it's impossible to predict like every need or every use case
Totally.
that people will want. Like that the flexibility of the underlying data structure will be important.
Absolutely. And that way, saying a frame implies subframes, for me, it's useful in that it doesn't mean that the subframes totally define the frame. Does the signature is it enough for uniqueness? But that's the point of making a super frame, of a frame of higher rank, so that you can add what's missing from the atomic, built from the atoms consideration, and say, well, there's also this. And this is a kind of very, very meta type of reflection about how are we representing knowledge. So that's what I'm thinking about these days. And of course, how do we represent those frames in data visually and so on and so forth. That's the fun part.
Do you feel
I
like,
have a,
sorry, I was just trying to connect
Go
this
ahead.
back to the trade-offs thing you were talking about. Like, do you feel like trade-offs are just like a type of thing that can be involved here, or like a core
Look,
thing?
I think it's definitely a very high rank frame. When you have a trade-off, you start with having two evaluations. So you're saying first, this proposal, supposing the proposal is itself of whatever rank, right? Because it can be quite complex object. This proposal is good or bad, or at a certain quantitative level or qualitative level, according to some criterion.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an evaluation. And there's the other proposal with this other criterion is at this other level. And the trade-off is comparing those two evaluations. Like whenever there's a proposal, there's implicitly evaluation behind it. That's what I said about, Tim's example with the, if you just say, as he quoted, the cost, the economic cost of the lockdown will be worse than the human cost of the pandemic. Two people can have totally different estimates of respectively human and economic cost of each respective option, not even be in the same ballpark, and still make the same statement. They don't agree. They may think they agree because they agree with the statement as stated, but the statement is profoundly meaningless. You don't know what you mean by, okay, what's your estimate of the economic cost? What's your estimate of the human cost? What's your conversion factor? And until we have those, could mean almost anything. The sentence could mean almost anything. And saying the trade-off frame, saying it is worth or it is not worth, that's a trade-off. That's what a trade-off is in a way. It's saying this, the cost according to this criteria versus the cost according to this other criterion. And can we make the trade-off, and is it valid or not? But it is based on an evaluation frame. And the evaluation frame is combining a proposal, a criterion, and quite possibly an estimation process or a measurement process, which is usually implicit. But, how did you estimate that? Well, that appears when it's problematized.
Mm-hmm.
And it should be possible to just say, here's my estimate. And then say, oh, I contest your estimate. What's your evaluation process? Okay, evaluation process was implicit. Let's make it explicit, and then let's enrich the frame by making that slot explicit. And a lot of things like that are, a lot of frames have all these potential actors that are not actualized until called upon.
Potential actors. What do you mean by that?
Like the here in this case, the estimation method. Like when
Hmm.
you have an evaluation frame, we don't normally mention our estimation method unless
Mhm.
called upon.
Right, I see. And you might, so then you might have like a frame that's comparing the evaluation of how important A is versus how important B is, and then like B, if you have the evaluation method for each of these things separately, then you could like reuse B's for comparing B with C in a different frame.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah, otherwise, why go through this trouble, right? The reuse and finding that this is common and that is.
mm-hmm.
Okay, anything else? I'm done. Anything else? Anybody else has anything else to add?
I think Bentley mentioned the creating a common debate database or like repository or something.
Yeah, so just
Talk more
kind of
about
like
that.
base debates that the Canonical Debate Lab has too, that would allow us to, you know, when we're testing our system, you know, we could use this same debate in multiple systems, and so we can compare and contrast more easily. I don't know if anyone else has any other interest in that. I was on the In the Bin podcast, which is a, a rhetorical professor who's visited us before as having a podcast, and Tim actually made it on there for a little bit, I think. Anyways, we were talking about, they were saying maybe historical debates, so like the Ken Ham and Bill Nye debate about creationism and stuff. Of course, the problem with that one is that they're just debating the definition of science the whole time, and it's like, that's not a useful debate. So Malcolm X and some of the other ones, they thought it'd be interesting to do some historical ones. But I'd also, yeah, I don't know. So I don't know if anyone else has any interest in that. I was also thinking of maybe going on Kialo and see if I can find some smaller ones and clean them up.
When you say a debate database, how formal do you expect the database? Like we could have the transcript, we could have
No, I mean,
you mentioned Kialo is more structured.
No, I'm not, and I'm not really even saying a database. I'm just saying nodes and pro con and just the simplest version of here's a sample debate of simple small.
What about reusing debate map stuff? Because debate map is a repository of
Yeah.
debates.
If there's anything in there that's not too big.
There are smaller ones. Definitely, there's what 200-ish debates right now in debate map.
But I think also a lot of times like the smaller ones seem to be like not really, I don't know.
Yeah.
It would be good
No,
to
fair enough.
that's a good point to go ahead and look there for.
You're right that Kialo has past debates, or what's its name? Is it Lumio? No, not Lumio. Yeah, it's Lumio. Not sure.
And but yeah,
Yeah.
I think setting up a repository, like a Git repository, which is where people can kind of throw in data, couldn't hurt. Because that can be used to train AI or just like run some test cases like, hey, can my app run with this type of argument? Could I like transfer this over? And because
The-
I think creating some sort of formal structure would require like more discussion if we're going to make all of them like the same structure. But like, as long as people can understand, it's like, oh, this is what this means, and this is what this means within this data format, then people can use that.
I think I would propose, if we are going to do this, and I'm not against it, let's have the GitHub start with debate formats. And then here's the debates we have under this format. Here's the debate we have under this format. Here's the debates we have under this format. And then people could start writing converters.
Oh, that might be interesting.
Because I still have a few debates that were done on Assemble, which I could try to dig up, which have a safe representation. Like we created this RDF format for, which is basically RDF formalization of IBIS. That could be useful.
I have in the past looked for debates to like convert to my like problem solving structure. And so that I guess is where my interest would lie in like comparing. I actually posted today just in the Slack about like comparing different ways of representing like the same information, and like evaluating the benefits of each. And that I guess is where I would be interested. That that my interest there involves a lot of like, looking at all the individual details rather than, like a mass quantity of debates that, you analyze or use.
I think Bentley
but-
is more talking about the value of the human data. And I agree that there's huge value in knowing what happened. And there, I would argue that the right representation has to be event-based to be useful for scholarly analysis.
Has to be
which-
event-based. It is what you
Yeah.
said? Sorry. Oh.
Yes, yes.
I guess
yes.
that's not what I'm thinking, but that's okay.
It's a different thing. Yeah, no. But I mean, like right now we're looking at ways to analyze. Like when I was working again in the Catalyst project on Assemble, Mark-Line had all these fascinating indicators on debates structure, such as, who are the most controversial, who has the most shared interest, this, that. But he needed to know, who voted for this one, who read this one. And he needed to have actually the read events. And I'm talking, Felix and gang have come up with pretty amazing stuff. But again, they require voting information, not necessarily unstructured, but unstructured conversations. But they can get pretty interesting data out of that. We should totally invite them for the next meeting to show what they've done. But yeah, as I said, Mark Lane needed not only voting, but reading data events. And that was part of the data representation because it's what he needed to give certain signals. So I'm saying scholarly analysis of how people behave in debates depends on this very precise event data, which is a very different need than non-scholarly analysis, or like Joel is speaking about what are the characteristics of different formats, and that's totally valid. It needs to be done, but people want to analyze how do people behave in debates, and that's important too. That's a scholarly need, and that requires not only just the debate structure, but also the debate history. That's a very different need.
Mhm.
So, and Joel, your one you have proposed actions, but then also is there kind of a pro con on whether that's a good idea on each action, or is that not? Because that's not what I consider traditional debate argument map, which has one motion and
Yeah, I am like structuring what are the problems involved, what are the options, and then like the argument for whether an option is good can like break down into, well, the option creates these effects and those effects are good, or you can just directly like do a pro con tree on like the solution itself of it being good or not. But I've tried to like prefer like if a pro is an effect, like converting that pro on the solution being good to an effect, and you can like, because then you can just see it uh in the like overall structure of the diagram rather than having to like go into the argument tree for one like option. And then like the effect can be maybe another solution creeps the same effect, and then it's easy to reuse in that way. But yeah, so it's not like the standard like one claim and then a tree just for that. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that would be a different. It's a different enough use case for mine that I don't think our useful list of debates would be overlapping. I mean, in
That's fair.
theory, my debate system would be a subset of your debate system. So if someone was arguing, oh, will that effect come about? Or can that effect come about? Then that pro-con debate would be what I need. But there's no, I mean, yeah, I guess the effects would be as well. Just mine are reframed in the traditional debate format, not having effects be separate from just general pros and cons. So yeah, there may not be enough overlap to work on that together. Maybe our system.
I may be wrong, but I think the idea of having a database of debate data, like a repository of debate data, per debate style, and here's the data, here's the documentation on the debate, not style, but sorry, debate format. And it's actually interesting to see, what do people consider debate? There's huge variety. Like Jack and I are extremely negative about any pro-con thing that doesn't include opening up to a new question, or at least refactoring. But different people have different definition of what qualifies as a debate. That's also interesting, I think.
Yeah, I guess now that I'm thinking about it, I mean, it's almost like we have that in Ysaurus and in Kialo and in debate map.
Yeah, Lumio, whatever.
So maybe all I'm looking for is, oh, these are some fairly good small play debates. Not play, but they're small debates. Like I don't want to throw the 9,000 from the society libraries things in my system yet. So this might just be a list of, here's a good one on Kialo, here's a good one on Ysaurus. That then when we're talking, we can use an example. Like, we're often talking about the Socrates example, but I really literally hate that one because it is a fallacy, a way of arguing. So I'd rather have something more of something that's an effective mini debate to use as examples in our system so we can compare and contrast.
So if you set that up, I can, like, at least on my end, I know I can provide the like data used for some of the Logipedia articles, and I can pop that in there. I don't know, again, if that's exactly what you're looking for, but that's at least what I could provide if you wanted that.
So say that again.
If you create a repository, I could pop in the data for the articles in Logipedia, just kind of the pros and cons, and some of the other data I didn't include in the articles. So if that's useful to you, I can pass that on. I'm still a little bit confused exactly what you're looking for, other than just debate material.
Yeah, I think all it is right now is literally a list of URLs to good debates online.
Okay, just a list of URLs to good debates. Oh,
Yeah.
okay, gotcha.
Because I think people are pointing out to me we do have debate databases. I just wasn't thinking of it that way.
And I
and-
also have a number of good debates I've been watching recently, so I can.
Well, when I say good's not very specific for me to say. What I'm saying is small debates that would make good examples for comparing between systems. So, not good debates as far as entertaining, not good debates as far as well written. Although I think it'd be good to have one that has been like, I don't. It's a lot of times people will throw a debate like tabs versus spaces in their system as a test, but often it's not very fleshed out. Anyways, so I don't know.
I understand what you're saying about URL might be enough, but I'd like to just remind you of the fragility of net data. And I think making a copy, even if it's only through, I don't know, Web Archive, IPFS, whatever, but I'd like to really recommend taking a snapshot, because maybe the debate won't stay small and it won't stay well curated and it won't stay, like, snapshots matter
Yeah, the
for that
snapshot's
kind of project.
a good way to handle it, finding a shared rather than a shared debate format that we put these all in. Like you were saying earlier, just take a snapshot of whatever the data is right now and have a copy of it. Yeah.
Yep. Which I think is, you're right, it's a way to avoid all the philosophical, what's the best format. Let's postpone that discussion. I'm all for that.
So it'd be interesting if people in this group could take as homework to find some kind of small demo debates that we could just list somewhere and dump so that we can use those in our discussions and in our systems as examples. Because it'd be nice also when someone's demoing a system, if it was a debate we're all familiar with, I think it would save time on the grokking of their system.
I approve totally. When you said small demotimate, do you mean like toy examples such as Socrates' model, or something more real? And I think we need both. And I think I would totally be in favor of saying, here are the, demo as in, this is the minimal, what we expect to run, versus demo as in.
Yeah, I think like my small play debate is a city debating about turning a street into closing it down, make it pedestrian use only. And that one's pretty simple and small, and that's fake. It'd be nice to get, I think, some real ones that are also, and I think tabs and spaces would be one, even though Carl thinks it's not a debate. Because there's some surprising stuff that people forget about that, like how it affects people with vision impairments. So it'd be interesting to see them just a little bit more fleshed out than, what I don't want is, I don't want Boba Fett versus Jango Fett. I don't want fictional based debates, because you can argue anything. And so it's like, it's a waste. I mean, based on like someone's fiction, which I guess is the same problem with my other debate. It's just, I find those annoying. It's all, I guess where it's all opinion. What's the best Star Wars movie?
No, that's, I agree. Those don't make sense. If it's just opinion, but I'm saying you can argue, was Boba Fett justified as a classic example of using a fictional fact to think about values, and those are, I think that this is good. Should have done this, should have done that. Those can be real arguments. I totally don't care about this specific argument. Don't get me wrong, but I'm saying you can have substantial debates based on fictional facts.
Yeah. I guess
agree.
It's thinking more of the opinion.
Best episode is perfectly useless.
Yeah.
Unless you start explaining, well, I think it's best along this criterion, and I think this criterion is important because.
If you list the criterion beforehand, and they're not individualized criterion, it's like,
No, but I mean, then you can have a substantial debate about, I think this criterion matters or doesn't, and this becomes, it's an opinion, but on the other hand, you can start making real points about it.
Yeah.
Why is this important?
But yeah, cool. Well, actually, we're at the end of our time. Any
Yep.
more comments before we close down the meeting?
Go ahead and send out a place to collect all the debates, and then we can start adding that.
I think for now we would just be posting them links in the channel. Because
Gotcha.
I think what we're going to end up doing is just putting the pages on the Canonical Debate Lab website. Although I think Marc-Antoine converted that to something and I don't know how to update it, but
No, I didn't.
didn't?
I don't think so.
I showed some commits from like 2 years ago or something.
I'll have a look.
It's not a big
But
deal. We'll figure it out
I don't think I had direct access to the site. I added the page, but
okay. We'll see. Yeah, but
Okay.
I think we'll just kind of post the data and the links on the CDL website probably. Make it simple. Or yeah, we'll figure it out. Just put it in the comments. We'll play around. All right.
Sounds good.
Thanks everyone.
good job.
See ya.